User interface designer Keir Ansell joins me as we talk about Vulcan, one of Beach's brand new products. It's really exciting. I hope you enjoy it. All right, cool. So, a little bit of background to start with, for context. Uh, Back in 2011 or something, I worked on this project called My Spare Brain. I don't know if we ever talked about it. Did we ever talk about it?
I think so. The name rings a bell.
Yeah, remember this at all?
Uh,
It's
yes, I
visual,
do.
like concept graphing, kind of tool, visual note taking. Uh, it was super cool actually. Bit of a weird experience. And in the end, I stopped, working with the guy who I was working with on this. And then like, as a reaction to that, almost like on the rebound, like, from a bad relationship, my way to get over it was just to do it again myself. And that's what I
Hmm.
did, with this brain do. Um, and then for one reason or another, resources, money and everything, I kind of stopped developing it, which was such a shame, really, because I had a shitload of, research and stuff in there, really interesting. And then, I just didn't maintain the app and kind of lost it all. But still, it was a good, it was a good experiment. So phase three of this, because it's coming back to a certain way, is called Vulcan, right?
Yeah.
But this time it is way more interesting, right? So this is kind of the context of but it's important to note because the starting point, the basic features and functionality of Vulcan are still kind of very much in line with what we were trying to achieve here. And basically for me, every time I get into a new complex topic of which, in this line of work, that's not hard to stumble across. Never been more so since going heavily into like blockchain, and crypto and all this kind of stuff. I needed this tool again. So, initially I just started out thinking, well, I need to really quickly basically remake Braindo. I couldn't bring it back alive without investing a whole load of energy to do that, based on the old code base. So we kind of started again. And my brief was just like, I need this visual, like, information and knowledge tool again for this new world of particularly on the blockchain and crypto stuff, but still just back in my life generally for all the other things that I like to research and play with and things like this. So this is kind of
Hmm.
how it started. Um, and it fits into the grand scheme of things. I'm not sure how much you remember in terms of, like when we did the IMIP project, when we did the Mixit project, we had a certain architecture of how we approached it, where we had the Beach core engine, and then we were developing custom engines for these clients for their own specific use case. So like the inventions and the patents for IMIP, and like the health engine and stuff for Mixfit, which was driving, Mina, the mobile app.
Yeah.
And this was the architecture. So Beach Core, which is, my open source core engine that provides a load of features and functionalities out of the box. You then have like these domain specific engines. Vulcan is driven in the same way. It's an engine that is designed to work with Beach Core on the back end side of things. But with the back end side of things, also has a user interface that's part of the experience. And the way I would explain it is Vulcan is designed to basically kind of be a very rich, middleware kind of layer between core and all the engines that you might develop, to bring them to life. And you will see what I mean by that in a minute.
Hmm.
And so this is kind of the approach. And, we started like that because, building this again from scratch, which I invested quite a bit of time and energy and a bit of money in doing this the first time. With Beach Core, I was able to do this way faster because, authentication, authorizations, all of the services that Beach Core provides out of the box, meant that I only had to focus on developing the specific pieces of, what represented this knowledge tool. But
yeah,
I had a bigger picture, right? So, the other thing for context to talk about is, as you know, I'm big on conversational design, building chatbots, this kind of thing. We did it with Mixfit. This is probably my most successful Medium post, the How I Design Conversations. Did you ever read this?
I think I might. Did it come through on one of the guild emails?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. So
I think I have read it.
This basically just demonstrates how I'd used, again, visual tools, which I use a lot, Mural, real-time whiteboard. I use them for different reasons to what I needed, the kind of Vulcan knowledge tool or BrainDo or whatever. They're more like visualization tools, whereas Vulcan's more of a research and knowledge and, my notes and sources and all that kind of stuff, much like richer information rather than pure visual information. And I use Mural, or have been using Mural, when I design conversations, because you need, flows and it needs to be visual and all this kind of stuff. So what we also decided, based on, knowledge working like this, because I have to build stuff, visually here, design the flows in terms of the constructs of what makes up a conversation, and then go somewhere else and actually implement them in code. And then, we started to actually develop tools and processes to make that easier. So this is also now an extension of this process. And we've kind of combined the two together. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
At least from a background perspective. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that for now and show you this. Whoa. Actually, for now, I'm just going to hide that and I'm going to bring this over here because the dialogue flow bit, that's like advanced. All right. This is Vulcan fundamentally. Thought I'd just wow you with a bit of stuff. Let's just start from scratch a second, and we'll go. Let's go with Keir's project, and I'll give you a very quick walkthrough. So we're creating a project. You can have different project types, analysis tools. I'm probably going to change the name of that to something else because it's not really right. But this is like the basic project type. It's the one with, you'll see in a
generic one.
Yeah, the generic one, like notes and research and stuff like that. The chatbot one, and then there will be other modules that have different elements, components, workflows, and things like that. This one actually doesn't exist right now, so there's only two right now that we'll talk about. So let's create a new project. We get a blank canvas at present. If I just double click somewhere, this is probably the easiest way just to explain. So, we have different objects that we can put onto the canvas. You have the general one, which, this is like, at the moment, the most primitive form of object. You can give it, a name. It can have a URL. It can have an image, all the basic stuff. I don't know, whatever. Let's just pick whatever comes up, and notes. And the idea here is, this UI needs to improve and everything, to be a lot, more useful and usable. But it's just basically an object for collecting research, notes, thoughts, writing, long form, short form. I actually do a lot of long form writing in here, and this isn't ideally laid out for that, but I use it like that. Getting information into here, you can drag and drop stuff from around the web onto the canvas, into the object, and it automatically goes in. It's quite rich, but it's also the most kind of basic form of object. You can also have add-ons that also bring in then integrated services and dynamic data. So let's just add my Twitter, in here, for example. And if I save this, you can see that in addition to the notes, I then have access to my Twitter feed, and we have YouTube videos, and we have, Reddit topics and things like this. So the idea is to be able to gather your notes, your thoughts, and rich data from around, the interwebs, as it makes sense to you. And the whole point is you store that in objects, and, you collect this research as quickly and easily, like dragging it from around the web. You lay it out in a way that makes sense to you. And the visual form comes into play here. So we get a lot of meaning from how we group and, cluster items without having to explicitly put them into certain folders and things like this. We can explicitly, group them. There's lots of tools for just generally like gathering and managing information. You can have, objects that actually link to other. So this is a chart, and we can have multiple charts in a project, and you can have objects linked to, other charts. So then you get some kind of like nesting, of information. And this is just the most primitive form of object. And like BrainDo was basically built all around just this one object type that was like notes that have these rich features. You can also, explicitly like create relationships between items, and, often it's the actual relationships that are important. And the idea is you'll be able to add, notes and other information actually about like, why is this related to this? Which is also very important in your information. Right. So this is an introduction. It's a very quick one, to the basics of, the approach that this tool represents. A couple of other object types that are in here that we've created, and there'll be others like a text type, a rectangle type, really primitive stuff that you can use in a more visual way on the canvas. But these are slightly richer object types. So a person, so this is like an address book entry, like a contact in your address book. The idea is if this represents a person, going on, I think person's broken. Broken? Yeah, you're broken. That's a shame. Let me refresh see if that fixes it. Like I said, it's still early, but okay, right, we're back. So, and then the idea is like often what you'll find is objects and particularly people exist in the context of different topics that you're maybe researching. So one of the things that this does is, it symbolizes objects as well. So you can have one master copy and then create instances of them wherever you need them. A bit like symbols in Sketch or whatever.
That's cool.
And the information then, it gets reproduced in those copies. So that's really useful. And then the third one is an organization, again, just similar to person, but represents a, business company and, an entity that's not an individual. And these are the basic types. And with this, you can, create some pretty interesting, collections of, knowledge. I use this a lot for, whatever, let's see, blockchain, cryptocurrency, researching second layer protocols, with, whatever, videos and stuff, blockchain basics, all this kind of stuff. So this is just like notes in a visual way. Different to Mural, different to like whiteboarding tools, which are more about visuals and flows and things like that. This is about, this has a different use case. All right. But that's the basics. Let's get on to
very cool.
Let's go on to the fun bit. So let's create another project. We're going to call it KeirBot. All right. And it's going to be a chatbot project. I could add some credentials for dialogue flow, but we won't get into that right now. That's like advanced.
Okay.
So I'll create this project. All right. Again, blank canvas to start with. Now, if I double click, you can see I have access to some different object types. I still have access to these. It's useful to be able to use them. But I have access to the chatbot objects, which are used to basically design and construct conversations. Okay, so let's just start with an example. Every good conversation starts with an entry point. Let's go with whatever. Welcome, start. We've got a Keir bot. Let's see. There he is. All right, we got our Keir bot. Okay, so this is our entry point, and the important thing of this is that it gives us a unique identifier for a point in the conversation. And this is really useful when I come back over to the actual like preview tool. You can see up here that we can start the conversation from any given point. You don't have to go through
okay.
The whole flow, right? So this is really important to strategically use the entry points. And then we'll just create like a very quick, like, welcome conversation. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go with, bot message. So this is then a fairly rich component. This is where KeirBot has the ability to communicate with the user in the conversation. So, what might you say to begin with? Hey, or sometimes you might say, yo, or another good Keir one is howdy.
Yeah.
All right. So the idea here is, this is just the simple like text message that you see in the conversation. And you can add multiple variants to add some variants to, the conversation so it doesn't become like repetitive and stale. It's a bit more natural, randomized. Then you have a body component which adds like richer modules. So you'll remember from the work we did, on MixFit, where we had this combination of MixFit specific modules, as well as the items that we did on like a generic checkbox list, for example. So things you might want from me. Number one, designs. Number two, money. And number three, jokes. Let's make it 100% width, and we'll save whatever the user selects to a model. And this is the basics, but this is the start of some really kind of rich functionality, where then I can store data in state, and I can use the data that's held in state to do all sorts of conditional things that direct the flow of the conversation. So, but let's wants from me is where I'll store this, right? So if I'll save this. And so as you can see, we've got, it could just be like a video from, YouTube or whatever, an image, and we will add more and more, of these kind of components. And they basically get presented like, well, you'll see like here, like message, then next message will be a rich kind of message type. Mm-hmm. And then the final piece of the bot message is user actions. Again, have certain user action types. We've got a button, a select, like a select,
a drop down
thing, and an input. And you can also, mix and match them together. So, typical scenario might be just, using a button. So, here we might just get the user just to acknowledge that you've said hello to them, to trigger them moving on to the next step. Let's do this. Oh, one thing you just saw here. So when the user triggers the button, I can also give it some data to pass through state as well. So such as emitting a signal, and the signal can be any kind of piece of data or identifier that I can then use to say, oh, this means that they pressed this button and therefore will now take the flow in this direction. So let's just start with like a very simple example. Actually, let's just go with true. Oh. And we'll save that. Okay. There's an example. So like I said, you can like have inputs. You might have like an input and a button where you can get, in fact, I'll show that example as well.
Like a kind of what's your name type thing.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do that one. I pretty much do that every single time. What's your name? And then we'll come in here and we'll put an input and we'll make that 80%. And we'll save that as name. We'll make it a text input, add a placeholder, done. And then in here, we'll have a button. So we'll use this to actually then submit. And in here, some little like nicer little thing here. But for now, I can actually use, what am I doing? I can put a bit of markup in there as well. And then in here, we will admit the signal name if name exists. We could optionally, like, if I put name in here, it would only show the button if some value for name existed.
It's been noted, yeah.
But but we won't do that for now. We'll show the button, but we'll only send the value stored in name if name exists, right? So we can do that. And all right, cool. So actually, this is fine. What I might do then, because we can actually make this into the conversation, and it gives me an opportunity to introduce another object type, which is filter. So here I can say, right. All right, so we set up a button that had true. Actually, just thinking, I'm going to remove that for now because it's just going to complicate things a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to say if signal equals true. Okay, so if they press the button basically and given the signal true, then allow it to move on. Otherwise, I can then create like another, scenario. But for now, let's just keep it simple. I'll connect these little babies. We've got connections, and in these connections, we've got a couple of settings. So like delay, which is really important when you're designing conversations to
make it a bit more realistic.
Make it more realistic, exactly. So we can do that on a per connection, basis. Mm-hmm. Play around with that. But in principle, this should now work. And then let's just finish this off with another filter signal. What do we call it? Name, right? Signal. Mm-hmm. Signal. If. Actually, no, we don't even need this. Let's go with the other type of another type of object, which is user message. And then in here, we will put signal, right? So we have access to signal from here. It emits a signal, which we're passing it name. So by the time it gets here, it's in our signal. And we'll see this in a second. We'll be able to debug it if I've messed it up. And in principle, this is a user message. So this is then, we've got a bot message on one side and a user message on the other side. So in theory, what should happen is the name that they input in here when they press the button should go into the conversation as a user message. And well, let's give that. Yeah, let's give this a try and see if it actually works. It's always fun when you're building, something actually using it. All right, so we're going to start from that chat. We've got our Keir bot. Oh, I haven't actually connected the entry to first message, so that would be why that didn't work. So let's do that. All right, start again. So, hey, picked hey, that's cool. Show me the button, hi. Now I press hi. And didn't work. Let me see what I did wrong. Hi, action, true. Let's just do that. So. Hey, hi. Shut up. What's going on? Something's broken. If signal is null. So why is signal null? So one of the things you can see here, which is really useful, we can start a conversation from anywhere. We can also pass it some data at initialization, which when you plug this thing into your website or whatever, you can initialize it with some existing data. So like if your app already knows, who the user is or their name, they've got profile info, you can initialize the bot with that and store it in state and then access it in the conversation, which is super cool.
Okay.
And then this here is a state manager, so you can actually see in real time how the state evolves. So it's really useful for debugging, like now where I have null for my signal, which is weird because I pass it this. Let's see, emit signal. Oh, hold up. I remember now, we changed it, so I actually have to define a, data type. Okay. But true should have worked. Anyway. I know why. So actually, I can do this. I can pass it true, and then if I remove this, I think maybe that might work. He says. It's alright, I can cut this video. Come on, we're gonna figure this out. Alright, I'm just gonna try the other way then. If true, might just not like that data type. Why is it not sending a signal? Anyway, right, that's really irritating.
It's going to be something really
it's going to be
really somewhere.
Cool. Alright, so anyway, that's an introduction to some of the data types. Let me see if I can find it, either that or a recent deployment broke something and I just haven't figured it out. But let me open a project that's got some let's make life even more difficult by opening
Here's one I made earlier.
Here's one I made earlier, a really big ass one. Alright, so let's see if this works, because it did work at one point, so we might have just broken something. So let's grab this. So this, I'm making a bot here for all of Beach's products. That be a unified system for providing customer support across the different products and things like this. So anyway, so this is Ulf. our bot character.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what happens. Okay. Right, Ulf. Okay, cool. This is going according to plan. One thing you can see here is that I have the ability, yes, to put an input field and buttons and stuff like that as user actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's one type of user interaction, but at the bottom we also have this custom text input. So in a chatbot, like if you think about Facebook Messenger, you get like quick replies, but you can always just send a message. And that's basically what you have here. I can decide as the bot designer if I want the custom message to be visible or not at each step. I may not always want it to be, depending on whether I want to really control the conversation or allow the user to freely input something. But what it enables is then really interesting. Obviously, at this point, I actually normally wouldn't enable this here, but just for the purposes of showing it, because obviously you don't want two types of user, text input really.
Yeah.
But if, I could type anything in here, like, howdy doody, and it's completely contextually irrelevant to the conversation. So you have to be able to handle that. And this is where then another very rich type of object comes in, which is that we use a natural language processing chatbot, tool. This is Google's one, Dialogflow, for parsing that text using machine learning to figure out things like intent, based on the context that we provide it, that hooks up to Dialogflow. That's a whole nother topic to get into. But ultimately is what brings the whole richness of building a chatbot to life is the ability to, yes, control conversations, but also enable natural conversation to, take place and to handle that appropriately. So we're designing that into the tool and it already kind of works. But I won't go into it right now. Oh, I'm going to have a visitor. Here we go. I'm just on a call at the moment. If you can be quiet, that would be great.
Shut up.
You're shut up, yeah. Thank you. Alright, so that's really cool. We'll talk about that, later, but ultimately it's one object type that handles the passing of messages and the data that comes, with it, in the flow. So let's say I go ahead and put my name in. And you can see here it then sent the user message, my name is, and then I have access to data within the message. So here I passed it, with the double curly braces like handlebars syntax, some data, which it put in Steve, which is what I answered in the message. Let's just go through it. What brings you to visit us today? Steve still got access to that data. So let's go like product information. And you can see here that button only showed up when there was a visit reason, which is the data that is this. It's all very clever. I'm super chuffed with it, to be honest.
Very logical, yeah.
There's a couple of glitches in the actual scrolling of this, but that's okay. We'll fix those. So yeah, that's great. Which ones am I interested in? Okay, so you can see here that from here I selected product information. So therefore I filtered, I got product info, and then I got to this final object type, which I haven't told you about, which is a router. So when you then end up with really big flows, you then start to deconstruct them, and you have them joined up using, in this case, this router component. And the router has the ability to do lots of things. It could, join two flows together, which is how we're using it here by going to a certain entry. In this case, I'm going from here to here. But I can do other things, like I could trigger opening the file picker on your computer, or, could trigger, if we're in a mobile app, trigger opening the camera or the gallery or a certain app or a web page or whatever, making a call to an API or whatever. So that's pretty powerful.
Nice.
And so in this case, yeah, I'm saying go to entry, and this is how I'm kind of then joining the flow. So then I've got this flow down here, product info entry, and you can see this is automatically what's continued down to the point of here, waiting for my input. So then let's go with like hammer, and scroll so you can see it's then just put the name of the option. And then I haven't actually created the rest of these yet. But actually, this hammer, if I selected this one, you can see this actually goes to hammer topics, which is actually
so different
a complete other chart. And you can see there's no real content apart from the entry point. And interestingly, at this point, you might have noticed that this guy has changed. So
yes.
What I'm handing off to is a different bot that has a different persona and a different language and style, whose job it is to know about Hammer. And if you're really building these conversations in your business, it may be more appropriate for you to have different bots with different personas that have different skills and have them to be able to interact with each other appropriately. And we've designed the ability for that to happen in Vulcan.
I like with the routers and the option to move to different charts and things, it obviously makes it a lot easier to manage the behind the sines. So you don't have everything all on one canvas, one giant, complicated, messy canvas.
Yeah, you can't. That's it. It would break if things became too unwieldy. And some other products that are out there, not naming any names since it is on video at this point, but they struggle with that a little bit. And frankly, even so far in building, the few examples that I'm using it for, this is a joy to use, to construct. It's super fun, especially when you handle state correctly, unlike we did in the initial demo. Just the ability to create, massively scaling, conversations. And you can see how much I could, fit into this one chart, and then I can have multiple charts, all within this project. So the potential for creating vast conversational complexity is quite high. This is what we're working on. So the plan is obviously to keep working on it, to release a few bots that are powered by it. We have a few properties that you can see. We've obviously got the tool itself, this one. And to be honest, I'm quite happy with we obviously use material design just so we don't have to think about styles and things like that at this point. There will be a point that we want to bring the app itself into a common, we've got a lot of these dashboard type interfaces in Forge, in here, in Chisel, in Swage, which is another project that we're working on. I won't bother you with that at the moment. Dashboardy type interfaces, they all kind of need to be under the Beach family. But at the moment, that's not really a priority, just because it's so early and we've got more stuff to figure out than that. And this is fine. This doesn't offend me, design-wise. There are a couple of things that need some design help. One being this. So this is a separate JavaScript library, the actual chat widget that you would embed into your web page. Like the intercom, chat thing, pretty typical. That in itself, like that chat widget, needs some design thinking, my thinking into it. So that's one thing. We started some of this stuff in terms of like, all right, at the moment everything's just chucked into a list, but what are, clusters of messages, what do they look like? What theming options do we have, for people to be able to theme aspects of it, for, to suit their site and their bots persona and that kind of stuff. designing the rich components. We'll have some fairly primitive forms, but we'll have some more to go in. Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then obviously the goal is to bring this to life. So what I want to do is, filter this demo, what it's about, the vision, the history, into a product site, that communicates and launches, Vulcan to the world. And yeah, that would be kind of one of the next steps for this one. So like the marketing gun.
Yeah.
Which means a kind of product identity, like, product logo, then, kind of like our hammer kind of product marketing site. And then, starting to get, into the actual UI of it. Starting probably with the chat, widget. And there is another, like, interface to come out of this. I'm not sure if it will actually exist within this app. It probably will be to begin with, but it's one for, so you have a user and you have the bot having a conversation, but, you need to be able to have a human
to step in as a human.
To step in. So you basically end up with like a Facebook Messenger for enterprise, where you have a list of all your customer and bot chats, and a way for the bot to notify a human or a team of humans to join the conversation, see the conversation, so it's almost like a Slack app, essentially, where most of the activity is between user and bot, but with admin, intervention, abilities. And that would be a separate app, probably. Yeah, and that's really the overview.
I really like it, actually. Very cool.
It ties in very nicely with, everything else that we're doing, both in terms of big picture of my kind of vision of the future of, anyway, we won't get into that right now. But also, just, make sense as a product that will, integrate very nicely into like, Hammer, in particular Forge. So, we introduced apps into Forge where you can just enable it for your site. And in theory, in this case, you
should do the same.
Yeah, you can just like enable it, decide, is the widget top left, top right, some theme options, and just, it goes, the widget gets installed on your site. Meanwhile, you actually build the conversations via the Vulcan, interface. Yeah.
I really like it, actually. It's very, very cool, very well done.
Thank you. I have to say, Pavel, my developer, who I'm working with on this, who's like lead developer on this, has done an outstanding job of taking my seeds of ideas and craziness and then like running with it. He's done an amazing job. I'm only saying that because this is on video. He might watch this at some point. Yeah, so it's super
well
cool.
done, Pavel.
Why that initial example didn't work then? Why didn't that initial example work?
Can you reference the one that does work to find out what you need to put in there?
I didn't need to. It's like the most simple form of. Yeah, I might have to. Let me just check. Hang on. Let's go with. This is exactly the same. Oh, I'm not emitting any signal.
Anything.
But I'm also not filtering, so that's pretty straightforward. If you don't have any filters, I mean, to be honest, you actually, in this case, like, you actually wouldn't need that. So that's me copping out. of it and just like clearing all this, and then basically all that happens is it flows from one bot message to the next with with whatever delay I give it, or the default, or whatever. So that's the cheat. Cheating way. What I could do is go back to that, let's go with, go back here, and go, what do you say? Right, so if I do that, and then in here, I pass it. Right, so you can see this. So this is super cool as well, is that you can see that before I only had signal and model. So these are standard state entities. So model, I can basically use model as a bucket to just add data into and then access it.
Mm-hmm.
And signal is basically the default thing that passes from one message to the next. Okay.
Right.
Like exists generally, and then signal is more like a blip, a message right now in between these two states. But then you can see that I added a new type of data in here. In where was it? In here, called reason, which is where I'm saving whatever the user has selected from here. So, and then if I come in here, I would have to remember that, which I used to have to before we built this feature. But now, we got this kind of, this IntelliSense kind of predictive thing, which is super useful. And so let's say, all right, we'll do that. If reason exists, we'll send reason, and we could even say only show the button if a selection has been made, in which case reason is just saying reason has to exist. It's basically the same as saying reason equals true, but we don't need to do that. And then in here you would add filter signal equals and then we could add another one for signal equals what's the other one? Design.
Yep. Design
from it. All right, and then if I remove this and do this, craziness. And I could do this and do this and do this and go. What designs? Yo. This in principle should. This in principle, I'm just checking before I run it, so I can cut the checking out again. Oh, design, right? Design. Yeah, so this has this is a display value for the text, and then this is the data.
Oh, the ID. Okay.
All right, so let's see if that works. Let's grab the start point. We'll come up here, plonk this in. Howdy, reasons, money. So you can see here, that's cool. Cool. Yeah, that kind of works. And you see how the state kind of gets updated, and then I can go here, and then it sent the message with the name. And yeah, that's kind of how it works. And with that, you can do all sorts of crazy shit. Oops. Oh, sorry. You had headphones. That's fine.
I still heard.
Oh, thank you. I'm a bad father. I'm a bad father. So this is a new product that I want to bring to market, and I want it to look lovely.
Oh, it's bloody good product, I would say.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good in the future. So yeah, we're gonna have like loads of chatbots and websites and stuff like that, like Lambot and things like that. This is already better than Lambot in my opinion. But in future, this is the same tool that we'll be using to power my dream. This is where I'm getting into the vision thing now. My dream of right now, we would not be having this call via Skype. Like that's unacceptable in my opinion. We would both be donning our virtual reality headsets right now. Yeah, we'd be doing this, and we'd be basically sitting in a room together, or according to our brains.
Yeah.
We would be sat in a room together where you wouldn't have to worry about the state of your hair, because your hair will look like whatever you dream it to be, and we'll be sat. Where would you like to sit? Like next to a cliff on by a beach or something. It'd be nice.
That would make sense.
I would be pulling out a computer out of the ground that's like 20 feet, 20 feet tall and wide and stuff, and showing all of this on that, because that's where we're going. And in this call, I might have 3 or 4 other avatars in the space that aren't represented by humans like our avatars would be, but they're represented by bots. And the bots have certain skills, and they can hold conversations, and we can talk to them, and they can do things. How can they do those things? Because they've been built with Vulcan. And that's where we're going. I'm going to have basically a virtual, immersive, creative space where you can go and collaborate with teammates, like all of my team, which are based in, all around the world, all 30, 35 of them. Just like you're not in the same place as me. We can go and be creative and use technology to our benefit, where there can be other robot avatars in there that I can say, one could be my virtual sysops guy, who I can just like ask him how the servers are doing, and he'll be able to go off and tell me how all my AWS instances are performing, and what is the current throughput on, this, that, or the other, rather than me having to look for it, because frankly, that's boring.
Yeah, you shouldn't need to, so.
Yeah. That is until I, replace you and I need to build one that can design stuff.
I'm not too concerned about those taking over my line of work just yet.
Yeah. No, I'm not either. That's a bit tricky, that one. A bit tricky. So yeah, that's the vision. That's what beach is going to be all about, right? Is the whole beach island thing is a virtual, like, creative place where in the future, when VR headsets are super, crystal clear optics,
and everyone's got one,
and you can use it to read, and you can spend time there, that actually this is the future of work, as people are already working remotely, but losing impact in terms of, collaboration and ability to work in teams. This is something that will be solved using these technologies. So that's the future. That's the driver. But right now, sure, it might be just a little, widget on a website, we'll have a native, like, chat component as well for, like, building apps and stuff.
One step closer, though.
Yeah, it's all iterative. That's the plan.
Oh, I like it.